All right, strap in, everybody, because we're going deep on this one, a deep dive into the art of power talk.
Power talk.
How to communicate with the charisma and the impact of figures like Churchill or Reagan.
Ah,
And our main source material for this is J.N.C. Hume's book, Speak Like Churchill, Stand Like Lincoln.
okay.
And believe me, this thing is absolutely packed with actionable insights you can use right away. Have you ever felt like you could be a little more commanding in a meeting?
Yeah.
Or maybe you want to totally nail that big presentation.
Right.
Well, today we're going to kind of break down the secrets of powerful communication.
Yeah.
So you can really own the room and make your message stick.
What I find really fascinating about this book is how Humes pinpoints this shift in what makes a leader truly effective.
Okay.
He argues that the traditional spider CEO, the one who's all about the meticulous details and internal management,
Me.
is becoming less relevant.
Yeah.
The future belongs to the lion CEO.
A lion CES.
Someone who can not only grasp the details, but also communicate their vision with power and inspire others to action.
That really resonates. I mean, it's not enough to just be brilliant behind the scenes anymore. You have to be able to kind of project that brilliance outward.
Yeah.
So how do we tap into our inner lion? I mean, does Humes lay out a roadmap for us?
He does, and it's surprisingly concrete.
Okay.
Humes outlines 21 power secrets, specific techniques that anyone can learn to amplify their communication skills.
Well, you went.
And these aren't about manipulation.
Right.
It's about tapping into the core principles of effective speaking that have been used by influential figures throughout history.
Okay, 21 secrets. That's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot.
Give us a taste. What are some of the most intriguing ones? What really stood out to you?
One that I immediately started using myself is the power pause.
The power pause.
Humes argues that strategic silence can actually make your message stronger.
Okay.
It lets you command attention, create a sense of anticipation, and project real authority. Oh, interesting.
Think about those speakers who just keep rambling on and on and on.
Yeah.
You just tune outright.
Totally.
But a well-placed pause can be golden.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm always rushing to fill that silence, but maybe that's working against me.
Uh-huh.
So Humes gives us concrete examples of how this works in action.
He does. He talks about Christopher Plummer using the power pause to embody the authority of Coriolanus on stage.
Wow.
And even Queen Elizabeth, she uses pauses during her speeches to add gravitas to even simple greetings.
Oh, wow.
It's about using silence as a tool, not being afraid of it.
So it's not just about avoiding dead air, but using those pauses strategically for emphasis.
Yeah.
I'm already rethinking my approach to those awkward silences.
Good.
What else kind of ties into this idea of commanding attention, of having that, what Humes calls it, power presence?
Power presence.
Yeah.
He dedicates a whole section to it, and it goes beyond just your voice.
He dives into the visual aspects, clothing, accessories,
Right.
how your appearance contributes to the overall message you're conveying.
It's interesting that even historical figures like Lincoln and Benjamin Franklin were image conscious. I guess I always pictured them just solely focused on their ideas,
Right.
not necessarily what they were wearing.
But Humes points out that even Lincoln carefully cultivated his look
Right.
with the stovepipe hat and long shawl
Yeah.
playing on his height to create this distinct image.
Interesting.
And Franklin, when he went to the French court, ditched the powdered wigs and fancy clothes in favor of a simple brown coat.
Oh, wow.
He was projecting this image of American simplicity and pragmatism.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
They understood personal branding before it was even a buzzword.
Way before.
Does Humes have any modern day advice on cultivating this power presence?
Sure.
I mean, are we all supposed to start wearing stovepipe hats now?
No, thankfully no.
Okay, good.
He advocates for finding a style that reflects you,
Okay.
but still makes a statement.
Right.
Think of figures like Churchill
Yeah.
with his iconic three-piece suits,
Yeah.
or Margaret Thatcher's power suits.
The power suits.
It's about choosing clothing that exudes confidence and professionalism, but with a touch of your own individuality.
Oh, okay.
He even suggests looking to women like Princess Diana, Diane Sawyer, and Elizabeth Dole for inspiration.
Okay.
What he calls the 3Ds.
The 3Ds?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
They all had this polished yet approachable style.
Yes.
It feels like what Humes is saying is that power presence isn't about conforming to some rigid standard,
Right.
but about about using your personal style as an asset.
Exactly.
Now we've talked about presence,
Yeah.
but what about the message itself?
Yeah, that's where the PowerPoint comes in.
PowerPoint.
It's about having that one key message you want your audience to remember. Humes shares a great anecdote about Churchill refining his extemporaneous remarks in the back of a taxi,
Oh, wow.
proving that even seemingly effortless brilliance requires work.
I love that image, like Churchill crafting his speeches in a taxi.
Yeah.
It really highlights how much thought goes into impactful communication.
It does.
You can't just wing it and expect to move mountains with your words.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so Humes offers us like a tool, a way to kind of think about this.
He uses the analogy of a matchbook to illustrate this point.
Okay.
He says, you should be able to sum up your entire message concisely enough to fit inside a matchbook.
Wow.
It forces you to distill your ideas to their essence.
The matchpick analogy. Such a simple yet powerful visual.
Exactly.
It's about cutting through the noise and delivering a message that's clear and memorable, especially in today's world where attention spans are dwindling.
Absolutely.
But does Humes just focus on those big formal speeches? What about like everyday situations where we need to communicate powerfully, but we don't have time to craft like a grand oration?
That's a key point.
Yeah.
And Humes addresses this head-on with what he calls the power brief.
The power brief.
He argues that in our fast-paced world, shorter is often sweeter.
Now that's music to my ears.
Yeah.
Maximizing impact while respecting people's time.
That's right.
After all, I'm sure our listeners are probably multitasking right now.
Probably.
And we need to get to the point.
Right.
So Humes gives us some historical examples to kind of illustrate this principle.
He does. He contrasts Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, which was just 2 minutes long,
2 minutes,
with Edward Everett's 2-hour speech.
Wow.
Delivered on the same occasion.
Wow.
Brevity sticks with people.
Right.
Lincoln understood that.
Yeah.
He also points to Churchill's one-sentence address at Harrow School.
Okay.
Never, 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 never give in except to dictates of honor and good sense.
Wow. Those are some seriously impactful examples.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes a single sentence delivered with conviction can leave a more lasting impression than an hour-long lecture.
For sure.
And it's so relevant to our lives today.
Yeah.
Think about the power of a well-crafted tweet.
Right.
Or a concise email.
Exactly.
This deep dive is already changing the way I think about communication.
I'm glad to hear that.
I mean, we've barely scratched the surface here.
That's true.
Humes covers so much more, from using quotations and statistics effectively to the power of humor and storytelling.
Yeah, a lot more to cover. Welcome back. Let's jump right back into some more of these power secrets.
I'm all ears. Last time we were blown away by this idea of the power brief.
Yeah.
The idea that, being concise can actually make your message more memorable.
Yeah.
What about this power quote technique?
Power quote.
I'm curious how we can use quotations effectively to kind of boost our communication.
It's all about choosing the right quote. Okay.
And using it strategically.
Right.
Humes highlights figures like JFK and Nixon.
Okay.
Who were masters at incorporating quotes to add weight and authority to their speeches.
Oh, okay.
They understood that a well-chosen quote can express a point more eloquently than they ever could themselves.
It's like borrowing brilliance, right?
It is.
But I'm guessing there's a right way and a wrong way to do this.
Yeah.
You can't just throw any random quote into a conversation and expect it to land.
Exactly.
So Humes gives us some guidelines on this.
He does. He cautions against quoting someone you're not familiar with.
Right.
Or whose words don't genuinely resonate with you.
Okay.
It has to be someone you admire, someone whose words you believe in.
Yeah.
He also emphasizes the importance of framing the quote properly.
Right.
Setting it up in a way that captures attention.
It's like setting the stage.
Yeah.
Creating that anticipation.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite example of how to do this well? One that stands out is how Theodore Roosevelt introduced his speak softly and carry a big stick philosophy.
Okay.
He pulled out an envelope from his waistcoat, paused dramatically,
Oh, wow.
and read the quote as if it were this profound discovery.
Wow.
He literally framed the saying,
Yeah.
turning it into a truly memorable moment.
That's a fantastic example.
Yeah.
He used a bit of theatricality to bring the quote to life.
He did.
And it reminds me of how we talked about the power pause earlier.
Right.
It's not just the words themselves, but the delivery that makes all the difference.
Exactly. The delivery is key.
So what else did Hume's have up his sleeve? What other kind of tools and techniques did he offer us?
Well, let's talk about statistics.
Okay.
We all know how dry and boring they can be.
Right.
But Hume's has some clever ideas for making them more engaging, what he calls the power stat.
Now that's a challenge.
It is.
Stats are like the vegetables of the communication world.
Yeah.
Necessary, but not always the most appealing. How do we make them less like broccoli and more like dessert?
He has two key strategies, rounding and relating.
Rounding and relating.
Yeah. Instead of overwhelming people with precise figures,
Right.
round the numbers to make them easier to grasp.
Okay.
And find ways to relate those stats to everyday experiences.
Okay.
He gives this great example of explaining the 1958 U.S. deficit,
Right.
which was billions of dollars, by
Uh-huh.
saying it would cost that much to stack dollar bills all the way to the moon and back.
That's a brilliant image. A dollar bill highway to the moon.
Exactly.
Suddenly the statistic becomes so much more tangible and relatable.
It does. It makes it real for people.
I'm definitely stealing that one.
Feel free.
Okay, so we've got captivating quotes, engaging statistics. What about visual aids?
Okay.
Does Hume's talk about, PowerPoint and that kind of thing?
He does, and this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Hume's is actually quite cautious about overusing visual aids.
Oh.
He argues that too many slides can make audiences sleepy,
Right.
drawing attention away from the speaker.
Yeah.
He calls it the power outage,
Power outage.
when the technology overshadows the person.
I've definitely been in those presentations where the speaker feels more like a narrator for a slideshow than an actual human.
We've all been there.
Death by PowerPoint.
Exactly.
So does he say we should ditch technology altogether?
Not necessarily. Visual aids can be helpful,
Okay.
but they should be a supplement, not a crutch.
Right.
He suggests keeping slides simple, using them sparingly,
Okay.
and making sure you, the speaker, remain the focal point.
Okay, so less is more when it comes to slides. Good to know.
Less is more.
What about humor? Does Hume's address the role of humor in communication?
He does, and he makes a distinction between tacked-on jokes
Oh,
and genuine humor that enhances a message, what he calls power humor.
power humor.
He believes a well-placed anecdote or witty remark can make your message more engaging and memorable. But he cautions against forcing humor.
Yeah.
It has to feel authentic
Right.
and flow naturally.
I've definitely cringed at those awkward moments when a speaker tries too hard to be funny and it falls flat.
We've all been there.
So how do we cultivate this power humor without bombing on stage?
Hume's emphasizes the importance of storytelling.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He suggests using anecdotes, particularly those that offer insights into well-known figures or historical events.
Wow.
He tells a great story about how Lincoln used a humorous anecdote about a man who killed a dog
Oh, wow.
to illustrate a legal point,
Okay.
winning his client an acquittal.
Wow. So he used humor to win a case.
He did. He used it effectively.
It's amazing how a well-told story can make complex ideas so much more accessible.
It's true.
And I bet our listeners have some great stories of their own that they could incorporate into their communication.
I bet they do.
What about using stories to explain abstract concepts? Is there a technique for that?
He calls that the power parable,
The power parable.
pointing out that even Jesus Christ,
Right.
one of history's most influential communicators, relied heavily on parables
Right.
to teach complex spiritual concepts.
Yeah.
Stories make abstract ideas come alive.
Yeah.
They tap into our emotions and help us connect with the message on a deeper level.
It's like that age-old tradition of storytelling,
It is.
passing down wisdom through engaging narratives.
Exactly.
And we see it everywhere, from ancient myths to modern-day marketing campaigns.
It's a powerful tool.
Hume seems to be tapping into something really universal here.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. What other communication techniques does he explore?
Well, let's talk about nonverbal communication.
Okay.
Gestures, posture, facial expressions,
Bro.
what Hume's calls the power gesture.
Power gesture. Body language.
Yes.
I'm thinking power poses, strong hand gestures, that kind of thing.
You got it.
Okay.
He emphasizes that gestures should be authentic and purposeful.
Not forced or over the top.
Right.
He tells a story about Churchill silently giving Eisenhower the V for victory sign
Oh, wow.
as he lay on his deathbed.
Wow.
A powerful gesture that spoke volumes without a single word being uttered.
It's amazing how much a simple gesture can convey.
It is.
It makes you think about all those subtle ways we communicate without even realizing it.
Yeah, for sure.
What about those times when we have to read from a prepared text?
Okay.
Any tips on making that less stilted and more engaging?
That's where the power reading technique comes in.
Power reading, okay.
Humes acknowledges that reading a speech can sound flat,
Yeah.
but he offers a technique for making it more conversational.
Okay, I'm all ears. I've definitely struggled with making a read speech sound natural.
It's a common challenge.
It's easy to fall into that monotone deer in the headlights delivery.
Yeah, right.
How do we avoid that?
Humes shares the story of Ronald Reagan,
Okay.
who was actually fired from his first radio job for being a bad reader. Oh, wow.
But he eventually mastered the art of reading with expression.
Oh?
By scanning a line or two of text, looking up, and speaking those words as if he were simply having a conversation.
Oh, interesting.
He calls it the see, stop, say technique.
See, stop, say. I like it.
Look down at the text, pause, and then say the words while looking directly at your audience.
So simple.
Simple but effective.
It's about breaking free from the written word and injecting your own personality into the delivery.
That's right.
I can see how that would take practice, though.
It does. It takes practice.
Like any skill.
Any skill.
You have to train yourself to do it naturally.
Exactly.
What other gems of wisdom does Humes offer? What other tools are in his toolbox?
He dives into the art of crafting memorable phrases.
Okay.
What he calls power lines.
Power lines. Okay.
He reveals Churchill's secret formula.
Okay.
An acronym he called CREAM.
Okay, now you're talking a secret formula for unforgettable phrases. I'm dying to know what CREAM stands for.
C is for contrast.
Okay.
Using opposites for impact. R is for rhyme.
Rhyme.
To make your words more memorable.
Huh.
E is for echo.
No?
Repeating keywords or phrases.
Right.
A is for alliteration.
Alliteration.
Using words with the same beginning sound.
Good.
And M is for metaphor.
Metaphor.
Using figurative language to paint a vivid picture.
CREAM. Brilliant.
It's a recipe for verbal brilliance.
It's like a recipe for verbal brilliance, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
So many of those memorable quotes and sayings we all know
Right.
use these very techniques.
They do.
It's about being intentional with your language.
Yeah.
And using the tools of rhetoric to amplify your message.
Exactly.
This is incredible.
It is.
It's like we're learning the secrets of the verbal masters here.
That's the goal.
But even if we don't all aspire to be, Churchillian orators,
Right.
these techniques can be applied to everyday communication, right?
Absolutely.
Whether you're writing an email, giving a presentation, or even just having a conversation.
That's right.
It's about being more mindful of the power of language.
Yes.
And using it strategically.
Exactly.
This deep dive is blowing my mind. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of Hume's insights.
There's a lot more there.
I know we have even more power secrets to uncover, so we'll have to pause here and continue our exploration in part 3.
Okay, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into power talk.
Excellent.
We've unearthed some seriously powerful communication secrets from James C. Hume's book.
We have.
And I'm ready for the grand finale.
Let's not disappoint then. We left off talking about Churchill's CREAM formula for crafting those killer lines that stick with people.
Yeah.
But there's more to discover. Hit me with it. What other power secrets are waiting to be unleashed?
Well, how about this? Directly engaging your audience.
Okay.
Humes calls it the power question.
The power question.
It's about using questions strategically.
Right.
To make your communication more interactive and thought-provoking.
I like that. It's about tuning a speech into a dialogue, right?
Exactly.
Instead of passively absorbing information, the audience is invited to think critically and engage with the ideas being presented.
Yeah, get them involved.
But how do we craft questions that really get people thinking? What makes a power question so powerful?
Well, Humes points out that even Jesus Christ used questions masterfully to challenge his followers and make them examine their beliefs.
Oh, interesting.
Think about questions like, why are ye fearful, O you of little faith?
Right.
These weren't meant to be answered literally, but to spark introspection and encourage deeper understanding.
That's a great example.
Yep.
It's like those questions teachers ask in class where they're not necessarily looking for a right answer.
Right.
But but for you to think through the problem and articulate your reasoning.
That's right, to get those mental gears turning.
Are there other historical figures who stand out as masters of the power question?
Absolutely. Abraham Lincoln used a powerful question to defend his opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
Okay.
He asked, "Is not conservatism adherence to the old and tried instead of the new and untried?"
Wow.
This forced his opponents to confront the implications of their stance,
Right?
and it resonated with those who valued stability and tradition.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a single well-crafted question can sometimes sway an entire audience
Right.
or even shape the course of history.
It's true. Sometimes it's better to ask the right questions than to have all the answers, isn't it?
Often it is.
It's about stimulating curiosity and prompting people to draw their own conclusions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got power questions to engage our audience.
Right.
What about individual words themselves?
Yeah.
Does Humes dive into that level of detail?
He does. He calls it the power word.
The power word.
The idea that strategically emphasizing certain words can add weight and impact to your message.
Okay.
Think about it. When you're reading a poem
Right.
or listening to a song,
Yeah.
certain words just jump out at you.
Right.
They carry more emotional weight or create a specific effect.
Totally get that. So how do we find those power words in our own communication? Is there like a formula for that?
Well, Humes highlights Winston Churchill as a master of using pauses
Okay.
to emphasize keywords and phrases.
Oh,
He'd often introduce an unusual or compelling word with a slight stutter,
interesting.
drawing attention to its importance.
It's like he was a conductor using those pauses to create a specific rhythm and emphasis.
Exactly.
It makes you realize that
Yeah.
that silence itself has power.
Yeah.
It's not just the words, but the space around them that shapes the meaning.
It's true. Silence can speak volumes.
And he gives some concrete examples of how Churchill used this technique.
He does. For instance, he described the U.S. Lend-Lease program as a most unsorted act,
Okay.
pausing before that word unsorted to really drive home its significance.
It's a word you don't hear every day.
Right. It stands out.
And the pause before it made it stand out even more.
Exactly.
It's like he was painting with words, using those pauses to create light and shadow.
Beautiful imagery.
Such a subtle technique, but so powerful.
It is.
Okay, so we can highlight our power words.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure people don't miss the really important points? Do we just shout them louder?
Well, there's a more elegant way.
Okay.
Humes talks about using specific phrases to signal that a key point is coming.
Okay.
He calls this the power button.
The power button.
It's like hitting the bold button in a text document, making that phrase jump out from the rest.
Love that analogy. So how do we create these power button phrases? What are some examples?
Hume suggests phrases like, "Let me assert my firm belief,"
Okay.
or "and so my fellow Americans,"
Right.
to signal that something important is about to be said.
Okay.
He points out how both FDR and JFK used this technique in their inaugural addresses,
Right.
setting up their most memorable lines with these attention-grabbing phrases.
It's like a verbal drum roll, building anticipation.
Exactly.
And, it makes you think about how many great messages might have been lost.
Yeah.
Because the speaker didn't use a power button to signal their importance.
Lost in the noise.
Okay, we've hooked our audience, we've delivered our message. How do we wrap it all up and leave a lasting impression?
That's the power close.
The power close. The art of ending with impact
Oh.
and giving your audience something to ponder.
Okay.
Hume says it's about leaving them with a sense of inspiration, motivation,
Yeah.
or even call to action.
It's the mic drop moment.
It is.
But it's so easy to just kind of summarize what you've already said or fade out with a weak ending.
Right, you don't want to fizzle out.
How do we craft those unforgettable closing lines?
Well, think about using a powerful anecdote,
Okay.
a thought-provoking quote,
Right.
or a personal story that connects back to your main message.
Okay.
He shares an example of how Reagan ended his 1976 concession speech with a story about John Winthrop's vision of America as city upon a hill,
Right.
leaving the audience with a feeling of hope.
Stories are just so powerful for creating that emotional connection.
They are.
And I bet it's even more impactful when you share a personal story that reveals something about yourself
Yeah.
and your values.
Absolutely. It adds
Because
authenticity.
sometimes you need to kind of shake things up a bit, right? Not every speech can be a heartwarming story.
You're right. And Humes encourages speakers to be bold and unconventional.
He calls it power audacity.
Power audacity. I like it.
It's about taking risks and pushing the boundaries of typical speaking.
So who does Humes hold up as examples of this power audacity?
Well, think of figures like Churchill, Reagan, and Lincoln.
Okay.
They weren't afraid to take risks. For example, Reagan used this innovative man in the audience technique
Right.
during his State of the Union addresses,
Yeah.
where he'd highlight ordinary citizens who had done extraordinary things.
Yeah.
It added a powerful emotional dimension to his speeches.
Those are great examples. They understood that true leadership involves stepping outside of your comfort zone
Yeah,
and doing things that challenge the status quo.
absolutely.
This whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener.
It has.
What's the most important takeaway you'd like our listener to remember from all of this?
For me, it's that powerful communication isn't some mystical talent reserved for a select few. It's a skill you can learn and improve with practice and intention.
I love that. It's so empowering.
It is.
Even if we don't all become Churchillian orators,
Yeah,
we could all become more effective communicators.
that's right.
And you know what? I encourage our listener to pick one power secret
Yeah,
that resonated with them and try it out this week.
great idea.
See how it transforms your communication?
Yeah,
The power of words is within all of us. We just need to learn how to wield it effectively.
I agree.
And if you want to explore all 21 power secrets in depth, definitely check out James C. Hume's book, Speak Like Churchill, Stand Like Lincoln.
It's a great read.
It's a game changer. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.